as people are filtering in the room here, I've admitted everyone, so we're going to get kicked off. It's just a little after 2 p.m. Eastern. Welcome everyone from across the nation to our first webinar of April with some great panelists and products and services that you're going to love to hear about. I'm Craig McAtee. I'm the CEO of NCATC, which stands for the National Coalition of Advanced Technology Centers. A lot of you know about us, so you're members of us, and some of you have no idea. So I'm going to give you a quick 3-minute overview of us in a minute, and then introduce our great panel of Core Learning Exchange, who's one of our newest strategic partners, and you'll learn about that in a minute. So without further ado, welcome. These are our 4 strategic pillars, if you will. A future of work. We were founded 35 years ago around future needs for technician training and operator training, and we move forward into the 21st century. It's all about Industry 4.0, smart automation and manufacturing. That continues to be our core focus going forward with everything we're doing. Work-based learning, whether it's full-blown registered apprenticeships, internships, co-ops, or even entrepreneurship, we're huge supporters of those woven into the programs of community colleges and high schools across the nation. And if it's in competency-based education form, whether it's applied learning and knowledge and skills that are demonstrated, and I think you'll learn a lot about mastery-based learning today from Core Learning Exchange, all the better. And if it's coupled with industry recognized credentials, whether it's MSSC or NIMS or others, a lot of industry really makes that a priority as well. And wrapped around those 3 pillars is everything we're doing to raise up the bar and the boats in the sea here around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So making sure that all of our communities are helping those underserved and underrepresented populations. That's a huge part of what we weave into everything we do. Here's a little map of our membership across the nation. Currently, we've got over 165 community and technical colleges, but we also have 48 strategic partners. One, as we mentioned today, is our Core Learning Exchange, and you'll see their logo up at the top, right underneath Amatrol and ACTE and next to Autodesk. So a lot of you probably know these folks, and some of these logos represent hands-on experiential training or online training in your institutions. And we continue to grow that and expand it. But these folks are at our beck and call on any given day for our community colleges and high school programs to be more effective and efficient and meets industry's needs. We also work with 8 of the 19 manufacturing USA institutes, and those have been stood up over the last decade with Department of Defense, Commerce, and Education and Labor funding to keep America above and beyond where we would have been without them in emerging technologies, everything from 3D additive manufacturing to flexible electronics, robotics, composites, etc. And the ones with the red triangles above them are the ones that we partner with on a daily basis as well. We communicate from the field what's working in our school systems and our workforce development systems, and they tell us what's coming down the pike for research and development. So we make sure we're always keeping ahead of that curve. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker and the key guy in this organization, the CEO of Core Learning Exchange. I'll just tell you that you can look each of these folks up on LinkedIn and look at their great backgrounds and experience. But just to let you know, Jeffrey Katzman founded Core Learning Exchange in 2015 and focused on the mastery-based learning that you're going to learn more about today. And then in 2018, pivoted to make that the platform and the foundation for CTE training across the board. And it's an amazing catalog of training that you'll find in the Core Learning Exchange if you haven't already partnered with them. It's amazing. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and ask Jeffrey to bring his up and welcome Core Learning Exchange and their partners today.
Well, thank you very much, Craig. It's great to be here. Before I begin, I'm going to share just something in the chat here, just a couple of links for your reference. So you can just kind of take a look at that at your own leisure. And I'm going to jump in and share my PowerPoint here. And let's just start with give you an overview of who we are and sort of what our mission is and how we go about doing our work. So our mission is really to help schools really align what they do with what employers are hiring for. And obviously, employers are hiring for advanced manufacturing now. And one of our tenets is that we want to be able to provide equitable access to these skills and provide a way for students to be able to achieve these skills and potentially do it without incurring student debt. So really kind of focusing on this concept of alternative credentials and providing pathways to jobs for students in each of their local communities. Now, if we look at Core Learning Exchange, we've established ourselves as the center of a new kind of ecosystem, and that ecosystem is all sort of oriented to enable schools to create a pipeline of qualified candidates for really good jobs. And again, our partnership here with Craig and his organization, and our partners we brought on the call here today, we're all really aligned to this mission of really kind of creating a pipeline of candidates to get to these high-paying, high middle-skill careers that don't necessarily require 4-year debt. Now, our work, the way that we make sure that schools are really kind of aligning what they do with what employers need is we can offer or can rely on labor market analysis. So that labor market analysis needs to be done, and it's actually a critical part of any CTE program's funding strategy, because if you're going to apply for the most prominent funding stream, which is Perkins 5 funding to fund these CTE programs, every 2 years you're required to kind of look at the labor market data and make sure that what you are offering in your program is aligned to the employers in your local geography. And we use that information to kind of set up these pathways. And our goal is to, if you look at sort of the labor market right now, there are huge and growing shortages of qualified workers, and there's really an imbalance here. There's a lot of overskilled workers and underskilled workers, and the schools are just not really creating a pipeline of qualified candidates to fill really good jobs. So one of our missions is to really kind of widen that funnel and engage students at a much earlier point. And therefore, we engage and we kind of start working with students to get them into these pathways starting in the middle grades. And we work with schools and do an aptitude and interest, career aptitude interest survey that identifies their skills and their aptitudes and their interests. And using that kind of information, it matches them up with career exploration opportunities. And one of our partners, Frank Norton and Advanced STEM, has some appropriate content to kind of really in that project-based learning STEM field that will really kind of track more students into high school-based CTE programs. And so what we offer is, we can broaden the funnel in the middle schools so that we get more students engaged in high school. Our platform sort of sits right here. It's this aspect of it. And I'll say a little bit more about the mastery-based model, but our goal is really to have a kind of a turnkey solution for any CTE program that wants to stand up a program to kind of get students into these jobs. And we have a catalog of over 250 career and technical education courses, and two of our premier providers are joining us on this call today. And we'll have a moment to get more acquainted with their specifics in a moment. But mostly, we want to get students ready to get to those jobs, but there's typically most high school students aren't quite ready to join the workforce, even if they've gotten industry certifications in high school. We need to kind of get them into workplace learning situations to get them experience. And so we have another partner that is another sister company of ours where they work with employers in your local geography and create a streamlined approach to be able to allow employers to set up, manage these internship and workplace learning programs. And then one of the key things that we do that's sort of, I think, the crux of really sort of what is the future of learning and the future of training is that we're going to be documenting not just students, whether they got an A, B, or C on their carpentry course or their electronics or whatever they're studying. We're documenting all of the component competencies that they're mastering in the context of these courses. And we're documenting them in this thing called the Comprehensive Learner Record, which is a cloud-based wallet, as it were, that collects all of the students' mastery events of all their competencies, along with all the artifacts and evidence, and allows those students to be able to curate their skills and be able to present those to prospective employers in a machine-readable format. And I'll say a little bit more about this in a moment, about this concept of stackable skills. But, what we're really trying to plan for here is a scenario where, students are being prepared for jobs of today, but also jobs of the future that don't quite exist yet. And jobs of the future are going to end up being jobs that are mashups of other skills and adding new skills. And so by documenting each component competency as it's being mastered in the context of a course, or while they're on in their internship, or even while they're on the job, it provides a way of allowing employers to be able to look at a student's set of skills and see how closely they match up to what they're hiring for. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment as well. But at the end of the day, we want to get students to those jobs. So by getting them earlier, broadening the funnel, we get more students engaged in CTE programming in high school and community college. Those lead to internships. We're documenting all the skills, and that would then get those students into those jobs. Let me get to my next slide here. So I'll tell you a little bit about our mastery-based approach. So even independent of any content, Core Learning Exchange was designed from the ground up to support this idea of mastery-based learning. And mastery-based learning is in comparison to traditional models, the pacing of learning is driven by the student's ability to master each concept. And the role of the instructor in a mastery-based model is not necessarily to be the sage on the stage and the conveyor of kind of, of knowledge and skills. The role of the instructor in this model is to monitor the student, provide them appropriate personalized supports so that every student is always learning in that zone of proximal development. And we're always kind of setting up the situation where the students are always being somewhat challenged and are given challenging but achievable learning targets. And what we found, and a lot of research shows, that when students have voice and choice in what they learn, so they're picking CTE courses that they want to take as electives or as part of their pathway, and you give them these challenging targets and you ask them to basically hack their own methodology to how to reach competency, they achieve much higher achievements and much more quicker. And the knowledge is deeper and it lasts longer. And so in a mastery-based approach, students are learning how to articulate the skills they have and the evidence that they have to be able to achieve that competency, so that we're documenting that into their comprehensive learner record, which becomes a permanent part of their portable record. But more importantly, they're really learning the skills about how to talk to adults about their skills and what they know and what they've achieved. And when we work with our partners, like the couple that are on this call here, we take the courses and we kind of set it up into this mastery-based progression model where you have to master skill one. The teacher gives you all the support you need to achieve skill one. And once you can assert that you've mastered that competency and you can provide artifacts and evidence to prove that mastery, then you're going to move on to the next badge or next skill. So each course is going to be a series of I work on this competency, and then as soon as I master it and produce artifacts and evidence, and my teacher evaluates it, then I'm presented my next one in that progression. And in this way, this model allows students to be able to be recognized for prior learning, for example, and it's perhaps the most efficient way of getting students through this content. And you know, the idea is that you know, this model is somewhat gamified, and so that students really begin to build up a velocity of their learning, and we move through this content much more quickly, and there's much higher retention rates. Coupled with each badge, so a badge is basically this unit of instruction. We badge the competency when it's achieved, but the way we lead the student to mastery or get them to that competency is we present them with what we call a playlist. And a playlist is a progression of learning activities that are bite-sized. So we use micro-learning activities, and you know, we give the students little bits of information and frequent formative assessment. And we basically instrument the system so that as students are learning something, they're being quickly tested. And if there's any kind of disconnect there, it's immediately picked up by the platform. The teacher is notified, and then the student and the teacher can kind of work together in that scenario to close the gap. And depending on what we're talking about, and for we have a spectrum of ways of doing this, but when we're talking about, you know, some kinds of content can be delivered in a complete virtual kind of modality. So, you know, we have these playlists where the students work through kind of self-paced learning activities, but generally they will, each of these playlists culminates in some sort of project or some sort of assessment that synthesizes all of the knowledge and provides the artifact that the student needs to prove the evidence. And our partners on this call here have really awesome content that really fits in well in this model. And one of the things that's somewhat unique about our platform is that we offer all of the content and make all of the content available to every user under one license. And then we meter the content as it's being used, and then we pay our providers in proportion to that level of usage, so that teachers really are making the best choices of content for their students. So their motivation is picking the best resource to match their student. And we, kind of like Netflix or Spotify, meter the content as it's being used and figure out what percentage of total usage each publisher is getting, and then we proportionally divide up a royalty pool and pay the publishers based on that. So as a subscriber, you get the best content and that's available to you, and you can mix and match, and you can pull different content in from different providers and really kind of create very personalized and bespoke kinds of applications by drawing content from across a variety of providers. Now, if you look at, you know, I was saying that we have that platform on top of our platform now, and all of the content that we use kind of is kind of organized in this mastery-based model. But we have we think of our curriculum as being sort of a stair step and a ladder that gets the students to those jobs. And at the base of our pyramid, or at the first rung of our ladder, we have these kind of foundational skills that really every student needs to be successful in life, more or less. So there are, you know, digital literacy, financial literacy, entrepreneurship, 21st century skills, career exploration, civics. And we also provide diagnostic assessments to be able to identify any kind of academic gaps that might exist that might provide some sort of friction in students being successful in their chosen CTE pathway. But, you know, we start this process in the middle grades, And then once the students are sort of up into high school, then we start specializing and we give them these CTE courses and align them wherever possible to a certification exam. So the students are, many of these courses will prepare students to take and sit for these CTE certifications. And, Craig and NCATC, have partners that are part of this testing regime and are the ones that are defining these competencies, like NCATC and a few others. And then once the students have these certifications, we want to get them into apprenticeships. And our goal is always to kind of work with each of our partner schools to ensure that the students are getting the highest value for their time. And in the best case scenario, and this many of the NCATC customers are community colleges, where our goal is to always kind of partner a high school with a community college so that the students are getting their high school graduation credit, they're getting college transfer credit or dual credit, and they're getting the certificates, and then they're getting their jobs. So now, again, we are bundling all of this content under one license, and you can see there that that's some of our partners, and two of those folks are on the call here, and I'll transition to them in a moment. But just hypothetically, if you're a CT director at a high school or community college, and your labor market data tells you that you need to kind of get some more advanced manufacturing capacity, and we need to get more students trained up to be able to fill jobs that are coming into your local community. Your task of trying to kind of source that curriculum is rather nightmarish. You have to kind of make individual license deals with each publisher for each course even. You have to kind of integrate their technology. You have to get the teachers trained. You have to manage this whole onboarding process and so forth. And what our kind of key value here is that all of that curriculum is available, and you can just use whatever you need under one license, and it just streamlines the ability to spin up new programs inside your CTE program. Now, I'm going to talk one more minute here about, I just got two more slides, then I'll pass it over to my colleagues. So one of the key things that we think is a real differentiator and is the thing that really prepares students to get jobs now, but also jobs in the future, is this comprehensive learner record. So the comprehensive learner record is a technical standard that was defined by the IMS Global Consortium. And you can think of it like an e-transcript and a digital transcript and portfolio that documents competencies. So if I'm in, let's just say, a electronics course, I'm going to be able to get certified on my ability to kind of use a multimeter, for example, or understand some aspect of hydraulics or electronics. So we can document each of those component skills in this kind of machine readable format that ultimately will be used by these like Indeed.coms of the world to be able to submit a portfolio rather than sort of a digital resume, and then be able to have employers be able to kind of look at your profile of skills that you have and be able to match that up with the requirements of some job they're hiring for. Or vice versa. If you're a student and you want to get a job, you can identify what gaps you have and be able to close those gaps. Now, another aspect of this that's super important is that the competencies themselves need to be something that is recognizable by employers. And so the T3 network is a collaboration of the Department of Labor, Department of Ed, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And the Open Skills Network is part of this as well. These organizations are working with industry directly to identify and come up with common definitions of these competencies, so that there's a lingua franca around how do we describe a competency and what is the measurement of mastery for that competency, so that when a student makes an assertion that they have that competency, the employer doesn't need to know, well, that was issued from, this school or that school, and we trust this school but not that school. So it really streamlines the ability to kind of have a student be able to, or an employee be able to describe their skills. But really, what another aspect of this is that it really kind of removes some bias about sort of where did the student get that skill, it's a matter of equity, and it kind of creates a colorblind and geography blind way of presenting a set of skills to a prospective employer. And again, we're talking about how do we kind of document skills as they're being learned and mastered, and how do you can basically pull those apart and reconfigure them and be able to curate your own skills to present to a prospective employer. And we think this is really a critical aspect of sort of the future of skills. One final slide, and then I will invite my colleagues to explain their own specific content and what they're doing. But Core Learning Exchange is very flexible, and we realize that almost every program, whether it's at a high school or at a CTE center or a community college or a workforce training center, there are a variety of places where students will go to get this training, to get skilled up for these jobs. We can graft what we've got onto really any program, and we work with the leadership of those programs to identify sort of what their goals are and sort of what the optimal implementation will be. And really no two programs will look identical. But there are two sort of major modalities that we support. One is a completely virtual modality where you can have a remote instructor and you can have remote cohorts or virtual cohorts of students that are being pulled in from across a broad geographic area. And for the kinds of courses that, foundational courses and basic skills courses, things that don't necessarily require a hands-on lab experience, can be done and taught in this manner. Now, a lot of what we're talking about, STEM and manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, robotics, and those sorts of things, obviously, at some point, the students need to get into a lab and get their hands on some equipment and start working directly with it. So in that scenario, Core Learning Exchange works in a way that can be basically the platform of record, be the basically digital textbook, as it were, and provide analytics and data to the lab instructor to inform sort of what do they need to cover when the students arrive in the lab. And we've also had some pretty interesting, we're partnering on a few really interesting grant opportunities that kind of create a hybrid of this model where you might have, in a broad geographic area, in a rural area, you might have a need to have a mobile lab. And so students can be distributed across a large geographic area in their home school. They're working on their kind of foundational knowledge, and then once a week or twice a week, the mobile lab will turn up, and the students will do their hands-on work. So one kind of trailer and one truck can tow around a lab that can serve a broad geographic area, and rather than have each school kind of build their own facilities, many schools can partner and share those facilities. And that would work really well for robotics and some of these STEM projects and some of the things that our partners on this call will be talking about. So with that, I want to introduce. We'll start with Frank and in uniteSTEM. So one of the things to create the stair step to get students all the way from sort of middle school to a high-paying Industry 4.0 job. We started engaging them in the middle grades, and Frank and his team have developed some curriculum that starts in the upper elementary and carries all the way through to workforce training. And one of the things that attracted us to work with Frank was that we saw that many of the kinds of STEM-based, project-based learning programs that are available are very expensive, and they require some really expensive um, training and also material fees and so forth. And Frank, when we met him, he had a really innovative way of kind of cracking that nut. How do we drive down cost, drive more equity, broaden the funnel of those that wouldn't otherwise have these opportunities? So, with that, I'd like to introduce one of our premier partners, Frank Norton of uniteSTEM.
And I would need to learn how to use technology. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah.
So I will get started. I'll tell you a little bit about myself while the screen loads. So yes, my name is Frank. My partner and I, Andrea, we started uniteSTEM about 4 years ago. I worked in industry and in education for 10 years at the university. And she was in K-12 education for around 20 years, with her last position being director of math and science. And our organization was founded out of the need to do things differently and to do things at a flexible way, in a flexible way that allowed schools the opportunity to meet students where they are and to meet the budget that they have, because that is definitely one thing that we both see and both saw firsthand in terms of cost. The first, I would say, the foundation for us is that we think everybody should have access, and everything we do starts from that position. We want all of our programs, any of our courses, any of our work, our lab space, our relationships. We want our kids and we want our students to know that this is for them and that this provides opportunities for them for their futures. And in order to do that, we created and we're developing this ecosystem to help provide those services. So one of the things, I know it's sideways, and that's interesting. One of the founding elements that is in my ethic or in the foundation of our company is actually Booker T. Washington. And I won't go into, I can talk about him for hours. I will keep it to a minimum. Our work is founded in what he did and the visionary stance he had on understanding the necessity and understanding the positionality of having academic and active work being hand in hand. There is no separation between learning and doing. Like, we need to be doing those two things together, and we need to understand how those are done. The idea of learning academics as a separate entity outside of work, or that academic work alone is of value and then working with your hands is not, or has a lower skill value, is wrong. And to bring those things together. So our work is founded in the idea of making sure that there is access and understanding that work has value, work has honor. So we break everything up into three main categories. We have educators, resources for educators, resources for youth and family, and then we have our lab space, which is where we do all of the development work here. So for educators, we do professional development. We create curriculum, which is our partnership with CLX. And we customize and we train teachers on how to create their own, how to use, how to operate, and how to test various equipment for their classroom. For youth, we have a partnership with a charter school network. We have School Here Every Day. So what we're publishing or what we're going to be pushing out through CLX is what we teach our kids, and it's what we test, and we see if the kids like it and if it works, and if they struggle, we kind of work the bugs out of the system that way. And we use our lab, and our lab spaces, I should have some more pictures and maybe some other time we do a tour of it, but it's for a place and for educators specifically to come in and try everything before having to actually spend any money. And for a chance for our kids to learn and experience and put their hands on equipment and technology that they wouldn't have access to. We have probably over $500,000 worth of equipment in here that our kids have access to test and use, everything from introductory robotics to graphic design, laser cutting, CNC, across the board. So our programs, we have two main focal areas. One is middle school and one is high school. And we develop our curriculum and we develop our projects under the premise that they should connect and link together. And this is one area, especially from my prior history in managing STEM programs, in managing a teacher training for STEM programs, is material costs and training are a significant upfront cost for schools, and also for continuation fees. So as we're developing it, what we've done is we've thought about, one is strategic partnerships. So who are the companies that we're going to be working with that create opportunities for schools and have existing products that are not specifically isolated to one product. So you can program from multiple ways. So whether it be Arduino, whether it be Raspberry Pi, Robotis, Wolcata, we're looking at what the flexibility is, and that provides access for schools. That is what one of the core elements that we're looking for is, how accessible is it? So we want to know if we're going to be doing, say, AI vision systems. You know, can you use RoboDK? Can you use ROS? Can we link these together besides just C++? Or we don't want to be isolated to one vendor's program, because everybody who works in industry knows companies can have their own version and they're pretty much all the same, but you need to have a foundational base. Open source is the way to go because it lowers that threshold for schools, and you can really get a good, you can learn the foundational elements you need to get into the workforce and get into understanding the skills necessary. So in middle school, we do a lot of exploration. We actually kind of layer it in levels. We call it engineering adventurers, the innovators. So we kind of name things for kids, and they do help come up with that because they do like to take ownership of their work. And the products that they develop and they work with are things that are actually currently something they work with. So we have a project that's going to be coming out for that they're going to model in Tinkercad, and then they can either 3D print it or they can print it out on white paper and then cut it out on cardboard and then make it. So this is going to be a robotic arm that you can basically build it for less than $3 if you do it out of cardboard, or you can cut it on a laser cutter, and you can do it for around $450. And these are inexpensive motors and an open source programming with Arduino or a microbit or Raspberry Pi. We have design challenges that push them into like Fusion 360 really quick, because Fusion 360 is a strong platform. That is something that we work with a lot and focus a lot of our upper level middle school and high school programs on, as well as our older adults on Fusion 360. And some SolidWorks, but mainly Fusion 360, especially because of their manufacturing and CNC inclusion in the software itself. So in middle school, you know, they're learning, they're exploring, they're testing things out, they're 3D printing. They could be cutting out of cardboard. If we have a project where they can 3D print parts, and if you don't have a 3D printer, we're actually working with another company who's going to have a service to where schools can contract with them and pay a lower cost for 3D printing service charges to ship the parts to it. But we also include basically instructions on how to use a Dremel 3D printer, or even some of we're testing one right now, which is that belt-fed SaneSmart printer that's around $800. to be able to train teachers on using those. So you're not having to invest, you know, $50, $75, $100,000 into one 3D printer. For high school, we go a little bit deeper, and you're going to get the parts and equipment are a little bit more expensive, but still the flexibility remains. The students really start right from their engineering design course. They're going to be starting the elements that they're actually going to reuse as they move through. So the elements they'll design in engineering design, they'll either make them out of cardboard, laser cut them, machine them, and then they'll assemble them, whether it be a robotic arm, whether it be, we have one project called a useless box that you program to basically be annoying and to either close or reopen at will. Robot and various other different electronics and projects. And what it does is it allows you to integrate the learning process into one continuous thread. So a kid isn't just learning 3D modeling, they're learning how to 3D model with an understanding that these components are going to fit together and be wired up in a specific way to operate in a specific way. So now when we're doing things, we're not just putting circles and saying, is this tangent to something else? We're saying, okay, are these aligned according to the specifications to allow for this part to operate within its orientation? And then you can build, model, test, and move forward, very much mimicking what is done in industry. So this is, and I think for me, this is where the real fun parts come in terms of the development and what is going to be seen from, or what is going to be seen in the CLX curriculum. So here's some of the projects we're currently working on. This one up in the left-hand corner here is the Wakata. This is the introduction one for color coding, arranging, and inventory control, basics for inventory control. This is a laser cut kit that we're working on redeveloping because it just comes apart too quickly. So we're testing that out and actually going to be using a different material. Robotis has been another great partner. And so we're remaking videos for them and doing some writing with them to lower the cost for entry level for higher end robotics, especially for high schools, because industry uses their equipment. Their motors are by far some of the best out there. And then this over here is actually one of our prototype arms for middle school. So as you can see from the cuts, there's not a lot that goes into it, but a lot of thought goes into it. So thinking about with students and laying this out on paper, cutting it out on cardboard, prototyping it, that gives you all of your tools so you can see how this can kind of flow across. Now for high schools, this is where we're really starting to expand, and especially for community colleges and for workforce training. And this is a challenge that was actually brought to us in relation to cost and expense, and that's to how to do training when, one, we don't have the space for industry level equipment, or we don't have the budget for industry level equipment. So with Wakata, what we're working on are mechatronics and PLC programming units and curriculum that fully mimic the workplace and workforce development, and that uses the same software, same kinematics that are used when you're programming and developing an arm. So this one is a new one that's coming out that's related to automotive assembly, and you're actually programming and using 3 arms to do it together. We're actually also coming up with a way that schools can basically rent these and have them delivered for a period of time. So the students would then go through, they program each one, whether it be this middle one is inspection, this one's loading and assembly, and this one is removal. So we're doing multiple stages. Now the last one here, this one, we're going to show a short video because this is how detailed that we're going, and this is why we're writing it in a way for middle schools to be staged and to build across time, is because we want kids and we want folks to get to the place where they understand the complexity of how to take smaller thought processes and make a bigger thought process, and how you can take what is seemingly an excessively complex process and turn it into something that you can take a bite of and that you can actually do. So in this video, luckily I did speed it up. So the students are required to do this and go through it combines for here is the loading, assembling, positioning, conveyors, sensors, motion across the board of what would actually happen in a factory. The only difference is this fits on the top of a desk. And let me see, get up to the, yep. So then it takes it apart, tests it, just in a factory. Once it's finished, it's going to load it up. Now you'll notice you have multimodal transportation occurring within just one operation. So we have this vehicle here, the ground vehicle, actually works autonomously and operates based on the control signals that are sent from the conveyor belts that tells it when something's loaded or when something needs to be removed. We use the anchors there to help align things, especially with mecanum wheels. They can be a little bit touchy, but this is where we're going. And we're bringing this and we're using this as a way to bring education, and specifically high-end engineering and technology education and manufacturing mechatronics, to bring it to all students.
Thanks, Frank. We're getting a little pressed on time here, so I'd like to let's move on. Hang on one second. So if we could have Tim, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself. And so basically, again, when we were out looking to find content and partners to address sort of these foundational kind of workforce skills, we turned to Almon and found some really high quality content there. And if Tim, if you could kind of compress it into just a 6 minutes, if that's okay. I apologize. We kind of, each of us went a little longer than we anticipated, so we kind of crushing down on your time.
No problem. So normally I talk too fast. This is one case where probably will help me out, but I promise we'll get out of here on time. So I'll just hit the high points. Just a little background on us. Our traditional customers are the heavy equipment manufacturers, the John Deeres, the Bobcats, the Komatsus. We also partner with technical colleges like SUNY Cobleskill, and also four-year institutions like the Milwaukee School of Engineering. So our core audience is the technicians, the mechanics, the operators. Probably 10 years ago, maybe a little longer, our manufacturing customers started coming to us and asking for any kind of entry-level online technical training. Jeff, you touched on this. The common problem they were having is a technician shows up to hands-on instructor-led training. Maybe it's level 2 training, and they have no idea how to use a multimeter. They don't even know how to turn it on. So the teacher, the instructor, spends valuable class time with the lowest common denominator student. So even back then, there was this challenge. That's what instigated or instituted the genesis of our courses. Now, I just want to talk about this problem in a little more detail. To bottom line this, there is a huge need to find, train, develop, and retain technicians. This need is massive. The U.S. Department of Labor came out with a report last September. Through 2030, there are going to be 280,000 diesel service technician job openings. And I can tell you from being in the industry, we're accelerating past that number. Now, some of these might turn into electric and alternative fuel power technicians, but the point is the need for technicians is accelerating. So because of the shortage, the first big pain point these companies have is trying to find these people. Part of this workforce is a branding challenge. I'll luckily for everyone here, I'll kind of knock it on my soapbox today about the need for parents to push their kids into four-year colleges and saddle them with student debt. But for today's purposes, there are good paying jobs in high demand that cannot be outsourced to other countries that are staring them right in the face. So dirty, dark, and dangerous does not apply to our industry anymore. These technicians are using laptops, this complex equipment. It's a very highly skilled job. It's good paying. From that same report, average median wage is about $50,000. Again, I can tell you that's low by a long shot. So bringing it back full circle, What are we doing to help solve this problem? Part of the challenge is Gen Z millennials. I'm generalizing here, but they didn't grow up working on their tractors, working on their cars. I like to joke I'm one of the oldest millennials out there, so I can make fun of myself a little bit here. But it's tough enough to find these people, get them interested, capable in this industry, and then you have to train them. So we developed a suite of online entry-level interactive technical courses. We have over 11 hours of seat time. We cover topics like basic electrical, basic hydraulics. Those are our two most popular courses. CAN bus system fundamentals, HVAC overview, diesel engine fundamentals, four-stroke. But these courses are developed by technicians for technicians. They're interactive. They're chunked down to be short, bite-sized content. They provide a consistent message. They're a huge time saver. One thing I think that I do want to stress is what's underappreciated in today's world is how busy everyone is, whether it's a corporate world, whether it's institutions, everyone has to do more with less. They are running leaner than ever. They don't have the time to develop effective training, let alone entry-level training. So our courses cover the basics to ensure that when they get to any kind of hands-on, they are prepped and ready to rock. And with that, Jeff, I think I'll pause there and we can wrap it up.
Thanks so much. Yeah, and I'll pass it back to Craig.
Great. Hey, sorry, we crouched into the time. There's never enough time for all the great information, Jeffrey and Frank and Tim, that you've shared. But there's a question that came through in another way that I wanted to ask the group from the audience. How does mastery-based learning drive student engagement? I've got another one as well that I want to ask, if you can expand on that a little bit.
Sure, I'll jump on that one. So, mastery-based learning. There was a researcher, his name was Benjamin Bloom. Many people know Benjamin Bloom from Bloom's taxonomy, if you've ever done any kind of instructional design theory work. But a big part of his research back in the 70s, and he's had many disciples that have carried on that research, but they've discovered that there's an intrinsic way of teaching and learning that just has is deeper and has more retention. And basically, when a student has voice and choice, when they have some stake in what they're learning, first of all, it's just more interesting to them, and they engage in it more deeply. But when you provide students with these learning targets that are something that is difficult, and it creates it creates a challenge for the student that they have to work toward. So when students, they're not handed on a silver platter, and if they think of your own the best way you learn is that if you have a problem and you need to fix something in your house, you're gonna do whatever it takes to learn how to do it. And it's about kind of developing your own learning methodologies. You're really internalizing, and you're flipping the script here. You're not relying on the teacher, you're relying on yourself to kind of crack your own instructional way that you're going to train yourself, and that has the most effect. The teachers are there to kind of build guideposts and provide information and support the learning, but it's not their primary role to do the instructional delivery. It's up to the student to really figure out what is the best way that works for them. And then another aspect of it is, there's a lot of it's somewhat gamified, where you master the first skill and it propels you into the second. And when when you keep getting small wins along the way, you build up this velocity of learning, and students, just the acceleration curve of learning increases the deeper they get into the content, and the closer they're getting to their own personal goals. So that's really part and parcel of why the model works so well and why it applies so well to these kinds of courses.
That's great. I got one more question before I ask it of the group. I want to come back to Frank. Sorry, we cut you. I can listen to you all day long, and I wanted to say that NCATC for 20 years or more has really been a strong supporter of significant programs that help K through 12 and community colleges get more students involved in everything you're talking about. And some of the big ones that come to mind are FIRST Robotics, and of course Project Lead the Way. But both of those programs over the last 2 decades have every year grown in cost for the people that are trying to use them. And Frank, what you've described is a same approach and a lot less cost to get involved with students in K through 12, especially. Can you just expand on that one more minute before we move to the last question of the day?
Sure. I'll be careful.
That's okay. We're okay. We can talk about each other.
So I managed PLTW programming for 10 years for the university. So I am well versed in where it started and
Yep.
then where it is. Where it is not where it started.
Right.
PLTW is a good program.
Yeah, it is.
I will not, it is a good program.
Yeah.
And I'll leave it at that. First Robotics is a great extracurricular activity. It is not a program.
Yeah.
And it's great for 10% of kids who are already of interest. So it's a challenge. And the what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring these things together. There is no single solution. And anybody who says that I'm the solution, they're lying.
Yeah.
Because we have to work together. And part of what we talk about and what we focus on is community. And I'll stop there. It's like we have to work together. And it doesn't matter the program. We have to work together to find solutions to support kids, support our communities, and support our families. And what works in California or what works in Texas may not work in Michigan. And we have to take those things into account. The same thing goes for Minneapolis or Atlanta, or we have to talk, we have to have honest conversations about the economics of education in creating professional opportunity for students.
Well said. And I think I always say, as you just said in your own way, there's not one size fits all, there's no silver bullets, and every community is different. So that's why we actually have 7 mechatronics strategic partners, from Siemens to Intelitech, Amatrol, Festo, and now you joined the group as an online learning and experiential learning tabletop model. So there's now 8 through the Core Learning Exchange, and the more the merrier, because not one size fits all, and there's lots of solutions out there. I will just tell the audience before I ask this last question of you all that this is being recorded. It will be posted on our website early next week at the latest. And we have another 3 or 4 webinars scheduled for April alone. Next week at this time, we'll have one around Industry 4.0. The title is basically Smart Manufacturing, Data is the New Oil. And you can process that title in your heads, but it's with Festo and Siemens and 3 of their partners in sensor technology. So it maps perfectly with what we're learning today from CLX. And the last question here, Jeffrey and team, is the role, what role does industry play in defining competencies for Core Learning Exchange and your partners? Can you give us a 30-second answer?
Yeah, I'll take a swing at that one. You know, they're the ones that are hiring, and they're the ones that need the skills, and so it's up to them to define what it is that they want. And it's not really, schools have not been very good at this. They've created CTE standards at the state level that go out of date almost as soon as they are published. So it's really up to industry to kind of tell the schools what they're hiring for, what is, and how do they measure whether the student has that skill. And so that's why it's so important for them to be a seat at this table.
Absolutely. And I'll just say that we're strong proponents of doing more with moving the advisory committees into a business and industry leadership team, co-led by industry at all factors of the college or high school or middle school for that matter, so that the industry has co-chair or co-leadership of those committees, and the faculty and teachers more than not sit around and listen instead of talking about what they're doing. They listen to opportunities for improvement. So the trend is the 21st century for improvements. You're doing a great job, all of you, and we're so thrilled to have you as new partners with us. And I think this is just one of many opportunities for our audiences to learn more about the great work you're all doing together and beyond. So I want to thank each of you, Jeffrey, Tim, and Frank, for being with us today. And again, looking forward to working with you in the future. And again, hope the audience got a lot out of today. It'll be on the website in the near future. Lisa just put in a last URL for Core Learning Exchange. Click on that quickly before we hang up the phone or the internet for that matter. Thanks again, guys, and
Thanks,
have a
Greg.
great rest of the week. Thank
Thank you,
you
Greg.
all for attending.